Today we're going to be learning Nazir Daf Mem. This is the Daf for Shabbat. Today's Daf is sponsored by Abby Flamholtz in honor of Sigal Spitzer Flamholtz on her birthday, an inspirational mom, wife, daughter, businesswoman, and Daf learner. So we're going to start with the braita at the bottom of Lamed Tet a bit. We're talking about in what ways is a Nazir forbidden to remove hair? Is it just with a razor or is it other methods as well? So the braita says, Tanya Idach, we're starting 6 lines from the bottom of Lamed Tet a bit at this braita. There's a different braita that says Ta'al. In the words, Tar lo yavor al rosho, do not put a razor on your head. It sounds like just a razor. Talash mereit sifsef koshu, which I'll go with the Koran's translation. It's hard to know exactly what these terms mean. You tore, uprooted, or pulled, okay, some other method of removing your hair. Koshu, any hair, minai. And how do you know that you're liable? Talmud lomar lo yavor al rosho. Okay, do not pass anything over your head to be like, don't take your hair off your head. Well, in the end, if we're going to include anything, that makes the tar in the pasuk totally irrelevant. Why do they even use that word? The reason is it's actually alluding to the shaving at the end of the time of Nizirut. How do we know this? Well, the braita says, theoretically, you could have learned it, Lilamdomi Mitzorah. You maybe could have learned it from Mitzorah, because the Mitzorah has to shave with a razor. So maybe you would know from there that the Nazir has to shave with a razor. Where do we know a Mitzorah? Hold off on that. That's going to be a whole discussion for later. And in fact, this assumption that it's obvious by Mitzorah, but we have to learn it by Nazir, is going to be actually looked at opposite later, and we're going to have to deal with that. That's going to be one of the questions of the Gemara later. So keep this in mind. But right now, they think it's obvious it's by Mitzorah. Why don't we learn it from the leper? That EFSHA. Definitely you can't do that. She'ein danim kal michamor lachmir alav, because we don't take something, we can't learn something less serious from something more serious. Then the Mitzorah is more serious because he has to remove all of his hair of his body. The Nazir only has to remove the hair of his head. So therefore, if we have the Mitzorah has a more strict rule about this, then maybe the Ta'al, the fact that it has to be with the razor, is more strict by Mitzorah. So we can't learn it from Mitzorah, and therefore we learn it from here. From the fact that it says, Tar lo yavor rosho, we take that towel and we say that's referring to the Nazir at the end of his Nizirut. Rabbi Eliezer, no tzarich. Rabbi says you don't even need to do that. Why? It's obvious from the continuation of that pasuk that that's what it means. You don't need a special drasha to say, oh, Tar is unnecessary, so let's just take it to the end of the Nizirut. But Rabbi says, Harei omer tar lo yavor rosho ad milot. Now, in the pasuk, it says tar lo yavor rosho, and there's an etnachta. Etnachta is one of the tamei amikad. It means take a big break. Okay, it's the mid break of the pasuk. Then it says ad milot yimei nizikuto, until the end of his nizirut. Basically, should grow his hair. So the way the drasha reads it is as if there's no break there, and they read it like this. Rabbi says tar lo yavor rosho ad milot. You can't put a razor on your head until the end. At the end, that's when you put the razor on your head, meaning it's explicitly, or kind of explicitly said, depending on how you read this pasuk. But the pasuk means, the pasuk is telling you, when you finish, that's when you're going to be able to use the razor. V'haktiv, and that's when you have to. V'haktiv. So now, that's the end of the braita. The Gemara asks this question, which is not exactly sure what the question is asking, but haktiv tar lo yavor rosho. But it still says tar lo yavor rosho. Maybe this question is really, if we have lo yavor rosho, even if we say tar is talking about at the end, still it seems to be saying don't put a razor on your head. But it also says don't put anything on your head. So how do we read this exactly? Lavor alav b'shnei lavin. So what they answer, again, it's unclear what the question is, but what they're saying in the end is if you use a razor, you're going to go against 2 negative prohibitions. Both the fact that you took your hair, you removed your hair, and that you did it with a razor. So that's going to be 2 low tasses. Now we're moving on to Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda makes a statement about hair removal with a Nazir, and also, like we just went back and forth between what the Nazir can't do and also what the Nazir has to do at the end, we're going to also do that. Amar Rav Chisda, lilkot be'echat. That means you get lashes by removing 1 hair. You remove 1 hair of your head on purpose, you get lashes. La'akev b'shtayim. When it comes to the end process, you have to get rid of all your hair. But if you leave over 2 hairs, that's no good. If you leave over one hair, it's fine. So meaning you have to get rid of all the hairs on your head. But if there's one left, that's okay. 2, not okay. You're not really, what does it mean not okay? You're not finished with your Nazirut. Next, listol, the third thing he says is, listol eno soter ela berov rosha. When it comes to the fact is with the Nazir, if you cut your hair in the middle, you don't start from the beginning like you do with a Nazir who becomes impure and he basically erases all the days you did and start from the beginning. However, you do need a growth of 30 days. So let's say you took upon Nazir for 30 days and then day 15, you cut your hair. You actually have to wait another 30 days. You really do have to start from the beginning. Okay. If it was a longer Nazirut, then you just have to make sure there was hair growth of 30 days in order to shave it at the end. So listor, to contradict your earlier days, eno soter ela berov rosha. Only if you cut most of your hair. If you leave you still have the majority of your hair on your head and you only cut off part of your hair, then you shaved off, let's say, half your head or a little less than half. You still have the majority of your hair on your head, then you have hair growth and you don't need to actually go back. Okay. And the fourth thing he says is ubita, and with a razor, which sounds like all these things are only if you did it with a razor. It's only forbidden if you did it with a razor. It only is successful at the end if you shave with a razor, etc. Which the Gemara questions Rav Chisda. It doesn't work with anything else, or you're not liable for if you do it with anything else. Didn't we see all the braitas that said now these words never actually appear in a braita. Usually hakatani is a quote from a braita. Either this is some other braita, that there's a braita that says, how do we know all other methods you're also liable for? Some people say it's just paraphrasing here what we learned before, the different braita. We saw Rabbi Yoshia and Rabbi Yonatan's machloket, and we saw the Mishna, and we saw the braita, and all these things that seem to say that, or at least some of them say that any other way you do it. So we have all sorts of Tanaitic sources that say that. So how do we relate to that? When he said about that part, he meant like a razor, any kind of hair removal that's similar to a razor. Tanya Nami Happy. Now we have a braita to support something else he says in the Rav Chisda said, Nazir shetalash meretzif sef kol shehu, eno soter ela berov rosho ubetah. So we have the same idea before that. The halacha about eno soter ela berov rosho, only if you take the majority of your hair off, and with a ta'al, which again could be explained either like a ta'al or not, but that already supports what Rav Chisda said. However, the braita has a dissenting opinion. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda omer mishum Rabbi Shimon kashem sheshtei sa'arot ma'akvot bo kach shtei sa'arot sotrot bo. He says you just take out 2 hairs the same way you won't be able to finish the process if you leave over 2 hairs. You won't be able to shave if you remove 2 hairs and you don't have growth of all your hair. If you took out any hairs, you have to start from the beginning, or you need at least 30 days of growth. You don't necessarily have to start from the beginning, but you do need 30 days from the day you took out any hairs, as long as it was 2, minimum of 2, but yes, 2 would already be a problem. Now we bring a Mishnah. So far we've brought the braita, which again said mitzora is quite obvious, but that you need a ta'ar at the end. How do you know a Nazir needs to shave at the end with a razor? And then we learned it from the pasuk. And then Rebbe, there were 2 different ways to learn it out from the verse. Then Rav Chisda came and told us this law about that we then about the lokope echad lakeh b'shtayim listul only be rov rosho, and then we dealt with what Rav Chisda said. We inferred something that seemed to be contradictory. We kind of resolved that by saying he doesn't really mean you have to use a razor. And then we had a braita that said that, or at least in terms of again, the end process does need a razor, but the other part doesn't need a razor in order to be liable. And then we brought this braita to support what he said, and the Tanna Kama's opinion supported it. Now we quote a Mishnah from Negaim, which is all about mitzvah. So we talked about the leper. We're going to talk about it more. There's a Mishnah in Negaim, which says, there's 3 people who shave, and it's a mitzvah for them to shave. Nazir, Mitzorah, Uleviyim. The Nazir we know, the Mitzorah, the leper we know, is part of the end process. He shaves. That's what we were referring to before. And he actually shaves twice. I'm not going to get into the details now. And the Leviyim. When the Leviyim shave? Well, this was a historical moment in time. It was when the Leviyim were designated to be then the job of the Levites, and they were taken in place of the firstborns. So there was a whole process of which, number one, they had to shave all their heads. It says so explicitly in the Torah. I read to the pasuk. V'cho ta'aseh lahem l'taharam. Hazeh, okay, in order to purify them. Hazeh alehem mechatat, pour the mechatat, the paraduma waters on them. Heviru tal achol b'saram. Okay, shave all their bodies. Then there's some other things you do. In addition, there was this process, we're going to see this later, where they actually lifted them up. It's called tnufa. They had to be carried. I don't know exactly how this one happened, especially if they were really big people, but they had to do some carrying of them, which happens sometimes in sacrifices. You carry the animals, you wave them. It was this waving of the leviim. They were literally picked up. So now they say, V'kulan shegilchu shelo b'tal. First of all, if you did it without a razor, or you left over 2 hairs, like we saw before. You need a razor, and you can't leave over 2 hairs. Amar. So now that was the Mishna. Now we're going to go into the details of this Mishna and ask some questions. First question. So first they quote the Mishnah. Pshita. We know this. Why do you need to tell us this? It says explicitly in the Torah by all those people they need to shave. Wow, what's the Mishnah doing to us? Like the Mishnah is coming to add to the Torah. This didn't add anything. Well, Ma'u Detema, you might have thought, maybe it's just to get the hair off. Even if you use a depilatory cream, it would be fine. That's why that's come and tell us, no. You actually have to tiglachatan, you have to shave. It's not going to work to use a depilatory cream. Second question. Here's the main part for today. They all who do it without a razor, it doesn't work. I get it by Nazir. It's very obvious. Now, what's funny is it wasn't obvious to us before. We had to say, why don't we learn it from Torah, right? And we can't. Since we can't, let's learn it from this tradition. But now, Gemara is saying, well, we know that braita, so it's obvious. By the Leviim, it also says it explicitly in the pasuk. But mitzvah v'tar minala, something that was so obvious in that braita. And this Gemara is going to say, wait a minute. Where do you get mitzvah from that you need a tar? By the way, if you look in the psukim, you'll see it doesn't appear anywhere, the razor. B'chitema, they're going to try to do this type of drasha where we try to learn it from the others. You might learn from Leviim and say the following. Leviim need shaving, and their shaving is done only with the razor. So likewise, I'll say the same for Mitzorah. He needs to shave according to the Torah. So shaving by Leviim is with a razor, then shaving by Mitzorah must be also with a razor. Seems logical. But we can knock down this logical argument because the Leviim have to be lifted. People have to carry them physically. That means the Leviim have something unique to them. Maybe the razor is also unique to them, and no, therefore we can't. Then we can't necessarily learn from here to the leper. Okay, option 2. Well, why don't we learn from Nazir? But wait, Nazir also has something unique. You have to bring bread with your sacrifice. It's not leavened bread, it's unleavened bread, but you have to bring bread. That doesn't exist by Mitzorah, so again, it has something unique. So you can't learn from either one of them, but maybe you can learn from the combination of the two. And this is what we call the least common denominator. Okay, we're going to learn it like this. So they say which one? So again, now we start from the beginning and review, and this is how they're going to set up this common denominator argument. You can learn it from levites, but they have some unique halacha that maybe because of that unique halacha, that's why they need the razor. But Nazir Yochia. But you have Nazir on the other hand, who doesn't have that unique halacha that they need to be lifted up, and yet still needs the razor. And therefore, we could say, learn from Nazir. Let's learn from the combination. It's obviously not because you have to lift them up that requires the razor, because the Nazir doesn't have it. And Ma'ala Nazir, Shekin Korbanot Lechem, oh, you'll tell me, but Nazir has some unique halacha. Leviim Yochifu, well, the Leviim don't have the same unique halacha that Nazir has. It doesn't require the breads. Therefore, let's go back to logic. This one doesn't look like that one, and that one doesn't look like that one, meaning each one has something unique, but it's not that unique thing, obviously, that requires that needs the razor to be be used only. So let's look for the least common denominator. What's the similar thing about them? They need a shaving. And what do we know about them? Tiglachatan betal, and it needs to be done with a razor. So af ani aviyet mitzorah. Therefore, I'll include the mitzorah, meaning I'll learn from there to a mitzorah. Shu'uta un tiglachat. It needs shaving. And therefore, let's learn tiglachato betal. So why don't we learn from there? So it sounds like we'll learn from the least common denominator between the two. We'll learn from Nazir and Levium together that mitzorah needs a razor. However, Rava mibarnash the Ravashi. Rava mibarnash is going to say to Ravashi, no way, no how. There's one, and now we're on Amud Bet already. There's one thing about mitzorah that's lenient more than anything else, which is when the others brought the sacrifices, they couldn't change it if they couldn't afford it to a lesser korban. But the mitzorah, we allow the mitzorah to bring a leper to bring a lesser important korban. Okay, if they can't afford the animals, they can bring birds. So if that's the case, then maybe when we make them shave, maybe they don't need to shave their hair off with a razor. So, tomar b'mitzorah shekorbano b'dalut. In other words, those don't have a korban of a dalut, of a poor person, but the mitzorah does. So therefore, this limud doesn't work. So we now are stuck. We don't actually have a drasha for mitzorah. But besides that, we're stuck. Amalei Rava bar Mesharshia the Rava. Rava, the son of Mesharshia, says to Rava, I don't get something here. Hi, Tana mi'ikara, and I already made reference to this in the beginning of class. The Tana mi'ikara amar lelamdo mi'mitzorah iyavsha sheke'ein danim kal michamor la'achmir alav. In the beginning, we said, Nazir, where do we get tar from? We can't learn it from mitzorah because mitzorah is more strict, right? Because you have to shave off all your hair. And it was, number one, obvious to them by mitzorah. And number two, you couldn't learn from mitzorah to Nazir. Then the Gemara here on Amud Aleph of Ardaf said, but wait, we can't learn it from, we don't know where mitzorah is, right? And we tried to learn it logically. And we just said, you can't logically learn from Nazir to mitzorah, the opposite of what the braita had said. Umidina nami lo yalef. And not right. First, they said, let's try to learn it by logic. And then in the end, Medina Nami Lo Yalef, they couldn't even learn Mitzorah from Nazir. So why was it so obvious to the braita that Mitzorah is done at the end of your process, right? You shave your hair in Mitzorah. The leper shaves his hair with a razor. And you can't learn from there to Nazir, which is more lenient. And then here we flip it and we say, number one, we don't even know where Mitzorah comes from. Number two, if we try to learn it from Nazir, we can't because mitzorah is more lenient. And then in the end, we can't even figure out how to learn it. It's very strange. To which the Gemara answers very simply, although it's going to be hard to figure out what they mean by this. Okay, you can look at the study guide today. I'll help you organize this. There's a chart on the second side that shows you the braita, where it was obvious mitzorah is done with a razor, was the rabbi's opinion. And the Gemara, where they were questioning and in the end couldn't come to a conclusion, is according to Rabbi Eliezer. What's the machloket? The rabbis of Rabbi Eliezer. Well, we're going to learn now a Mishna. Ditna. Okay, the rabbis of Rabbi Eliezer have a machloket about something else. Their machloket is about when it comes to shaving your beard and parts of your beard. So we're going to see the psukim. Actually, I'll share screen with the study guide. And you'll see psukim inside. So, okay. In Vayikra chapter 21, it's talking to the Kohanim, and God says, don't shave your hair on your head. Don't shave the peot, the corners of your beard. In Vayikra chapter 19, it actually says the same commandment, similar anyway, to everybody, not just Kohanim. Lo takifu peat roshchem, don't take off the peot of your head. V'lo tashchit, and don't destroy pe'atz kanecha. Don't destroy the peot on your beard. Okay, so it says don't shave the peot on your beard to the Kohanim. It says don't destroy the peot for the Kohen. Those are the first psukim you need to know. So let's start with that. The rabbis say, Eino chayav ad shelaktenu b'ta'al. When we talk about shaving off your beard, it's only with a razor. Okay? Rabbi Eliezer omer, afilu likto b'melaketo v'rehini chayav. Taking it off in other ways, okay, other types of scissor type of implements where the shaving is not as clean, such a close shave, is also forbidden. So basically what we're going to say right now, without really understanding this, is that the braita that we saw before, which basically said it's obvious by Mitzorah, is going to go by the rabbis when he talks about shaving off the peot of the head. And we're going to see that from his issur of shaving off the peot of the head that can only be done with a razor, we're going to learn from here that the Mitzorah has to shave with a razor. We're going to get there in a minute. We haven't gotten there yet. And Rabbi Eliezer, who says even b'malaketo b'rehini chayav, is going to say that Nazir is specifically by b'ta'ar, but not necessarily Mitzorah. Okay? So, how do we get there? We're not going to get to Rabbi Eliezer today. We're only going to get to that in the next class, but we're going to get to Chachamim right now. My time, Mayu de Rabbanan. So what's their logic? D'Tanya, Skano. Now we're going to start with the Mitzorah. The Mitzorah, it says, and this I brought at the top of the study guide. Let's go to the top. Vayikra Perek Yudaled Pasuk Tet, chapter 14, verse 9. On the seventh day, Yigalach et kol sa'aro. He will shave off all his hair. You could have stopped there, but the pasuk says et rosho, his head, et skano, his beard, et gabot einav, his eyebrows, and et kol sa'aro yigalech, all the hair in his body. So there's all sorts of drashot, why they say rosho, why they say gabot einav, all that. Now we're going to start with the drasha. Why does it say skano? Why does it have to say specifically your beard? So the Gemara says, the braita says, matamud lamar. Why does it say that? Lafi shenemal pe'at skanam lo yigalechu yachol afilu mitzorakim, because it says pe'at skanam lo yigalechu, the Kohanim can't shave off their beard. You might have thought maybe the Mitzorah can't either. Let's say you're a Kohen who's a Mitzorah, maybe you can't. Talmud lomar skano. That's why it says even his beard, to teach you that even though it's a sword to shave your beard, you can shave, right? The Kohanim, the peot with a razor, you can do it if you're a Mitzorah. Now, point here we're going to get to in a minute is you can do it with a razor. And how do we know a razor? Minala and betal. How do we know that? Titania. In other words, the point being, the Mitzorah can shave with a razor, even though it's forbidden to use a razor. And that's what the word zakan comes to teach you. Skano comes to say, shave your beard off with your razor, even though it's forbidden to shave with a razor. And from there, we learn that you have to shave your beard. You have to shave all your hair as a Mitzorah, as a leper, with a razor. Why? Because if you didn't have to shave it with a razor, then you wouldn't have had to override the Torah law. You could have said, the zakan is only forbidden with a razor. So shave your hair some other way. Okay? So now they say, right, shave your hair as a Mitzorah some other way that won't have to go against the Torah. The fact that Skanam told you, even if it goes against the Torah, must mean that you have to do it with a razor. That we'll actually ask a question on in a minute, but let's get there first. So how do we know Batal? D'Tanya. How do we know that the whole issur is only with a razor? Because it says Pa'atz kanam lo yigalechu by the Kohanim. Maybe even if you do it with a scissor, you'll be liable. Talmud lomar velo tashchit. It says you can't destroy. Destroy means a really close shave. You might have thought, what if I take it out with some other implement, not right scissor-like type thing? You might be responsible, liable. Talmud lomar pe'atz kanam lo yigalechu. So now they say, okay, haketzad, how does this work? Okay, it's unclear. We have on the one hand, lo yigalechu, don't shave. We have on the other hand, lo tashchit. So what do they say? Ezu giluach sheyesh bo hashchata heve omer zetal. In other words, what they're trying to say is the combination of the two psukim and the word giluach and the word hashchata comes to be, it has to be something that can be completely destroyed. Okay? So therefore it says, it has to be something that has both giluach, both tashchit. What could that be? What's both giluach and destroying? Heve omer zetal. So from there they conclude it must be a razor. Okay. So now again, how do we get from here to what we're trying to prove, which is that the rabbis who say, now this was all, let's just go back again. The rabbis said when it comes to shaving your beard, it's only if you use a razor. That we just got to from this drasha, from the fact that the Mitzorah is allowed to do it, right? That comes to say, right, the first drasha we have is the Mitzorah is allowed to shave his beard, even though it's forbidden to shave a beard. Since being forbidden to shave a beard is only a razor, which we prove from the second section of the two psukim and the common denominator between Yigalechu and Ashchata, where do we find that they crossed over? that's in a razor. And the word zakan comes to say you can shave even though it's forbidden to do it, which means you shave with a razor even though you can't shave with a razor, right? A normal person can't shave with a razor, the leper is allowed to. And that's what the word zakan comes to teach. And again, I'll just repeat what I said before. If there was some other way to do it, then you wouldn't need a drasha to tell you it's allowed. You would just be able to do it with a scissor and or a shaver, let's say, an electric shaver you would use for the mitzorah instead of a razor, and then you wouldn't override this halakha. Okay? So the reason the word zakano is there is to teach you it overrides the halakha, which means that it has to be done with a razor. That would be why we override the halakha. So which the Gemara says, you don't necessarily have to learn it that way. You could say, maybe if you did it in some other way, you shaved your hair as a leper, all the hair of your body, including your beard, the peot of the corners of your beard, you would say you still fulfill the mitzvah. Okay, maybe it's not only with a razor. So what is Kano coming to teach you? Maybe it's coming to teach you that even with a razor, you're not liable. In other words, you have several options of how to shave your head as a mitzorah, it's a leper. And if you decide to use the razor option, you won't go against the Torah law of not using a razor. Okay, so now it's coming to teach you you're allowed to override the halacha, but you don't have to. Maybe that's what it's teaching. And not that that's the only way to do it, and therefore you override the halacha because there's no other way. So which the Gemara says, well, if you really think that would, you think that would work, Lishta Kramine, the pasuk should have just not said anything. And then what? Ana Amina, I would have known that. Okay, why? I would have known that you're allowed to use a razor anyway. Why? And I wouldn't have needed the zakan pasuk. Because I would have said, Ana Amina, Umagabe Nazir, the Isura Kavi, this big debate what this means. But some people say a Nazir who becomes impure and sinned by becoming impure shaves at the end of the when he becomes pure again, before his Nazirut is over. So maybe that's it. Or maybe Nazirut in general is a sin, because remember, Rabbi Eliezer Kapar viewed it as a sin to become a Nazir. Being a Nazir in and of itself, or maybe, right, and then we were referring to the shaving at the end, or maybe the shaving when you became impure, that's Isur Kavod. That's forbidden, right? That's an Isur, what you just did. It's bad to be doing that. And yet, afilu hachi mechayed. Even so, you have to use a razor. And what are you doing in the end? You're shaving off the peot of your head, right? Right. Remember, lo takifu peot rashchem, but you're allowed to take off the peot when you're a Nazir. So, the mitzvah, when the mitzvah process, but there's no sin involved. Now, some people do say you got mitzvah because you sinned, but that's a drasha. That doesn't say so in the Torah. But the mitzvah lo kol shekain. Well, the more so when you're doing a mitzvah will allow you to do it with a razor. So if the Nazir who did something wrong and is allowed to shave with a razor, then we would assume without any sort of drasha that the mitzvah could shave with a razor. Therefore, what? You didn't need the drasha kano. If we're reviewing it the way the difficulty was, which is maybe any method a mitzvah can use, it's not specifically teaching you have to use a razor. Just if you use a razor, it's not forbidden. We would learn it from Nazir. To which the Gemara says, therefore, Skano comes to teach you, no, you have to use a razor. And you have to go against the Torah law of don't shave off your beards, the corners of your beard with a razor. And from there, we learn that the mitzvah has to do it. Okay, so now we've gotten to the rabbi's opinion about the shaving, that it has to be with a razor, which then connected to the mitzvah, because we said, what's the reason for the rabbis? And that connected with this pasuk about the zakan, how that overrides that. All of that leads us to understand that the mitzvah has to shave with a razor. So from there, we've derived it from the words kano, that the mitzvah has to use a razor. Okay, that was all to get us to part one of our question, which is how do we resolve the braita versus our Gemara, where the braita seemed to say mitzvah is obvious that you need a razor, and our Gemara would say it's totally not obvious that the mitzvah needs a razor. And for that, we'll wait till tomorrow to get to Rabbi Eliezer. So quick review of today's daf. We started with the drasha about the ta'al and the different ways that we see that in the end, the Nazir has to use a tar at the end. We tried to learn from Torah. We couldn't. We, in the end, learned it from Drashot and the Pasuk, two different ways of reading the Pasuk, Rebbe and the Tanakh. Then we moved to Rav Chisda, who talked about how many hairs is a problem, is, have to do at the end of the process, etc. We had a few questions on him. Then we brought this Mishna about 3 people who shave, and it's a mitzvah for them to shave, the Nazir, the leper, and the Levi, the Levim at the time in the desert. And then we had a few questions on that, and our big question really being, which is, where do we learn that Metzora needs a razor? And from there, we started trying to learn it from Nazir and Leviim. We couldn't in the end find an answer. And then we said, I don't understand. It was so obvious, the Metzora from before. And then we said, oh, that matches the rabbi's opinion. And the Gemara is going to match Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, which we're going to get to in tomorrow's class. Wishing everybody Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Tov for today.